Welcome back to this week's edition of Weather Wonders. I'm Danny Cassidy. Some of you may have heard about the Dust Bowl either from the media, like The Grapes of Wrath, the famous book by John Steinbeck, or maybe you've heard it in history classes in school, or maybe you and your family witnessed it and experienced it yourself. No matter where you've heard of it or may have seen it, let's dive into why it happened, with the impacts here in the United States as well as in Iowa. So this is the main area of the Dust Bowl here shown on the United States. The main area here is through the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma, southwestern Kansas, southeastern Colorado, and northeastern New Mexico. The damage done by dust storms, though, stretched all the way into parts of Montana and South Dakota. And as I should mention, remember, the Dust Bowl was a series of dust storms that occurred through the 1930s and into 1940. One of the predominant causes of the Dust Bowl was the lack of dry land farming methods. Farmers from the 1920s plowed through the topsoil of the Great Plains area, which displaced the deep-rooted grasses that trapped soil and moisture during periods of high winds and drought. The northern Rocky/Great Plains region where the Dust Bowl mainly occurred is susceptible to extended periods of drought, and the 1930s was one for the record books. 4 of the 10 driest years were during the 1930s, including the driest ever in 1934. The precipitation for that year was only 12.84 inches, nearly 6 inches below normal. With these very dry conditions, soil across the area dried up to a very grainy sand-like substance, and this allowed the wind to easily pick it up and create these major dust storms. Since winds in the Great Plains and Northern Rockies area flowed with great regularity, dust storms were a high-occurring event during this decade. On April 14, 1935, a day now known as Black Sunday, consisted of 20 of the worst dust storms that stretched from southern Canada to Texas, including this one here in Oklahoma. The term Dust Bowl originated on this day by Edward Stanley, who was the Kansas City editor of the Associated Press. Now, not only did the region have to suffer through massive dust storms, but the 1930s were also one of the warmest decades on record for the Great Plains region. 4 of the 10 years in the 1930s were the hottest on record, and 1936 was the hottest ever recorded. The average high for meteorological summer, which remember is from June 1st to August 31st, was 86.2 degrees on average, 6.3 degrees warmer than normal. And it impacted here us in Iowa, particularly in Waterloo. 1936 was an extremely hot summer. There were 13 consecutive days at 100 or above degrees from July 5th to July 17th, 21 consecutive days at or above 90 degrees, and the highest ever max temperatures were set July 13th and July 14th at 112. July that year had the highest ever monthly average of 82.4 degrees. When everything wrapped up, the damage and impact was extensive. The Dust Bowl affected near 100 million acres of farmland, with losses reaching at $1.25 million per day, and that was back in 1930s values. 75% of the topsoil in the area ended up blowing away, and at least 7,000 people died from dust pneumonia, which was caused by those dust storms. If you want to learn more about the Dust Bowl, head on over to Schnack's Weather Block under the Weather tab at kwwl.com, and we'll be right back.